our heavyweight Q1. Just look at the names in that Q1 section, including world champion Marc Marquez. After, well, the celebrations as MotoGP world champion from Motegi started with 2 crashes for Marc in practice yesterday. For the first time in 2025, the first time in the blood red Ducati of the factory squad, Marc Marquez will appear in the upcoming Q1 session. So will his teammate Pecco Bagnaia. 4 Ducatis are going to be appearing in Q2. Another poor Friday for Tamina and Jura-V on 46. Fabio De Gianantonio only 18th on the leaderboard and what is a very inconsistent GP25 package. Frankie Morbidelli was 12th, just behind Marc Marquez. So you're going to want to tune in later on this morning as well for both of our 2 15-minute qualifying sessions. Matt Burt and Lewis Sotheby enjoying the coolness of our air-conditioned commentary box. We can't say the same for Jack Appleyard, who's trying to keep himself shaded as cool as he possibly can in what is a scorching hot pit lane. But we're ready to go then for the upcoming 30-minute FP2 session here in MotoGP. Marco Bezzecchi, clearly Lewis, the standout rider on practice Friday. I mean, he was utterly dominant, over 4 tenths clear of the pursuing pack. But there were some big surprises throughout that opening day. None more so than our world champion Marc Marquez in more trouble in Mandalika.
Yes, he's never finished a full-length Grand Prix here. Of course, didn't start the first year he came here when he had that big high side at turn 7. A pair of crashes yesterday afternoon, and Marc Marquez, when I spoke to him yesterday, said that he ideally wanted to avoid a third, so he perhaps didn't take the ultimate risks yesterday on his final run. So here's the story of Marc Marquez's practice session. This is crash number 1 on his way into turn 10, which took a good chunk out of his practice session out, actually, as he didn't really get to do a lot of the homework that he would normally do in a practice session. First time, as you can see, in a full year that he's crashed twice in the same session. He would later go down further round in a much faster crash coming through turn 5. He and his teammate Pecco Bagnaia, as you now look at the second crash, both going through qualifying 1. So can the factory Ducati team turn things around today? Their team manager Davide Tardozzi speaking now to Jack.
Davide, interesting day yesterday, on track and off track. Let's focus on the on track stuff first. Not often does the factory Ducati team have a bad day, but yesterday was definitely a bad day. What went wrong?
Yeah, I mean, there could be days that you can perform in the proper way, and unfortunately yesterday it happened to both riders. But anyway, we hope that this morning it will be much better. I think that the engineers worked a lot last night to try to find some solution. But again, can happen after races and years that you have a day like yesterday.
Last year Ducati had 7 riders in the top 9 in practice on a Friday afternoon. Yesterday only 1. So what's changed between last year and this year?
No, because tires are the same and bad luck, I don't know, but it seems that our opponents are more performance than us, Prix and Honda especially well. So we'll see today. The races are this afternoon and tomorrow.
Obviously a lot of headlines yesterday created over the confirmation that Pecco tried the GP24 at the Misano test, first confirmed by Ucho, then backed up by both Pablo and Frankie. What was the thinking behind that decision, and the bike we see Pecco on now, how close to the GP24 is it?
Confirmation, I don't know which confirmation. We confirmed that in Misano we had a good day of test, that we tested parts that we already tested in the past, but that's it. As I already said, our factory riders, Marc, Pecco and Di Gianantonio, have the possibility to try several parts, while the other guys for the old bike have only this bike, and we tested old parts too. That's it.
I mean, the VR46 team said they gave you Frankie's bike, so is that not confirmation? What is it that Ducati are hiding that don't want to confirm that?
I don't hear what they said, so I don't know what it was the meaning of the discussion. So you must hear what it was before and after the discussion. Honestly, again, we tested. It's true that we tested old parts together with new parts, and finally we have the time to fix those parts, old and new, and finally we found a solution. Honestly, it seems that here is doesn't work properly, but it seems that all the Ducati are in trouble here.
Davide, thank you. Have a good one today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jack. Thanks as always to Ducati Lenovo team boss Davide Tardozzi. The official company line from Borgo Panigale, they just will not officially confirm that Pecco Bagnaia did indeed ride a full-spec GP24 at that Misano test just a few weeks ago. Frankie Morbidelli said yesterday when he spoke to the media, he confirmed that there was one bike loaned to Bagnaia at Misano because he said it was natural for the team to want to help and support Ducati and Pecco in any way possible. Lucio Salucci was the one that kicked off all of this kind of drama about, is it the GP24, the GP25, the GP24.8? God only knows. Pecco Bagnaia, you can see he's at the end of his tether in terms of all this tech talk. Pecco said yesterday when he was repeatedly asked about the specification of his bike, did he indeed test the GP24 in Misano? Pecco isn't shutting down any more questions about bike specs because he said simply either ask Ducati or ask the boss Gigi Dall'Igna. It seems at the moment Pecco's default answer for anything tech related is don't ask me.
Yeah, he doesn't really want to know, and I guess he's fed up of answering those questions because it's the story of his entire season in terms of what configuration of motorcycle he's on. But I have to say my favourite part of that whole story is Lucio Salucci yesterday morning lobbing a grenade up in the air and then walking away whistling with his fingers in his ears as all sorts of chaos is unfolded around Ducati as a result of that. Blissfully away from all of that is Marco Bezzecchi, who we said already is the runaway favourite coming into this Super Saturday after topping yesterday's practice by 0.4 of a second. It's rare that you see margins at the front like that, never mind in the favour of an Aprilia, but Bezzecchi has picked up exactly where he left off first thing this morning.
Struggling a little bit more physically than they expected after the Martin shunt at the start of the sprint 7 days ago in Japan. He was expecting more trouble with his right leg, which got an almighty whack from Martin at the start of that sprint, but back pain, he said yesterday, was his main issue. It didn't really slow him down though too much, did it, yesterday? Bez was dishing out a pasting in sector 2 throughout day 1. We're going to get a replay here of Pedro Acosta. Luca Marini on the factory Honda. This is down into turn 2.
I'm quite sure why Pedro Acosta was so keen to go around the outside there of Luca Marini, clearly feeling feisty on this Saturday morning as Aki Ayo looks on. Acosta was third quickest yesterday on a 1:29.6, just behind Fermin Aldeguer, although it was very much a tale of the haves and the have-nots from a KTM point of view. Acosta their sole rider in the top 12 yesterday.
Just quickly coming back to Bez's authority and dominance in that sector 2, it was a pasting he was handing out to the field. Only Aldeguer, who was second, Acosta, who was third, Rins and Quattararo on the factory Yamahas. They were the only riders that were within 0.3 of a second of Bezzecchi in the second split at the end of that practice session yesterday. Bezzecchi was absolutely flying, wasn't he? He carries on that kind of form, well, he's going to be a big favourite for a double win here. 27 laps will be the full Grand Prix here in Mandalika tomorrow. The sprint 13 laps at 3 p.m. local time this afternoon. Bears wasting precious little time to seize control of this morning's FP2, and we have an Aprilia 1-2. We've only got 2 Aprilias out on circuit with no Martin, no Ayagura, in that beautiful Gulf liveried track house machine. Ralph Fernandez is second fastest at the moment, 5th on the timesheet yesterday. So it might be low grip conditions here in Mandalika, but it certainly not seems to be bothering or disrupting the Aprilias too much. Bezzecchi, Fernandez actually just gone top. Right on cue, Ralph Fernandez now leads with a 1:30.615. A real tough Friday once again for Red Bull KTM Tech 3. Nea Bastianini on the floor once again, struggling for confidence. Front end fitting was 50. And poor on Maverick Vinales, who was still in rehab and recovery mode after that nasty left shoulder injury he suffered all the way back at Sanctuary in Q2. The noises coming out of Maverick last night. Big talks he planned with the team and KTM, starting to question the value in carrying on riding at the moment. Not competitive, not giving good feedback, and in so much pain he's actually wondering whether to halt his season and come back fully fit later on. We can find out exactly what's going on inside the secondary garage because Jack is joined by the boss, Nico Goyon.
Yeah, absolutely. Difficult moment for the team at the moment, Nico, in particular for Maverick, who we can all see isn't himself. He's really struggling physically. So after the conversations last night and this morning, what's the plan going forward?
Well, obviously Maverick is not feeling good. He's not recovering the way we all expected. fitness to ride MotoGP. Obviously, this is not the case. It was quite obvious yesterday that especially on the left-hand corner, he was not comfortable at all. So that's a fact. At the moment, no official statement has been taken, but yeah, it's clear that we are trying to find the best solution possible for Maverick in the future.
He's obviously out there this morning. Is the plan still to partake in the sprint for the remainder of the weekend right now? Is it just take it lap by lap? What is the plan?
No. Clearly, we're gonna finish the weekend. This is the plan at the moment. We're gonna finish the weekend, and then we'll evaluate the situation at the end of the race, and we'll see what's best to do.
Right now, he mentioned about missing the final 4 Grand Prix to try and build on the strength on that shoulder and come back for the test. Obviously, it would be a huge shame, but I guess there's so much risk attached right now with how he's feeling. It's maybe the best route forward, because you don't want him suffering any further complications to an already tough situation.
Well, it's not really a matter of risk. He has the body is strong enough. He's not the strength. He doesn't have the strength to ride the MotoGP at the right level. I mean, there is no safety issue. He can ride the bike, no problem, but just he's not fast enough, and he doesn't want to fight for the last position, obviously. So this is a question mark at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Nico. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Thanks to Tech 3 boss Nico Goyon. Yeah, it's quite a tough watching and seeing Vinales struggle and suffer as much as he currently has. No points in the last 2 rounds for the 30-year-old Spaniard. 19th, he wasn't in the play yesterday, and nearly 1.3 seconds behind that fastest rider, Marco Bezzecchi, who's back at the top. No great surprise, based down to 1:30.260. Some more positive news as far as KTM are concerned. Yesterday, they put out on their social media channels that they have put their 2027 850cc motor on the dyno for the first time. So the good news, despite all the recent uncertainty, particularly through last winter, when KTM's participation and involvement in the 2025 MotoGP World Championship looked under serious threat, given their sort of financial crisis which engulfed the Austrian brand in the winter months. Well, the future looks bright, as they are the first manufacturer to go public with their 2027 850 spec motor on the dyno. Good news.
Of course, KTM, Aprilia and Ducati not subject to the same concessions ban as Yamaha and Honda, which means that their engine spec is locked in not only for this season but will continue into 2026, so they will not change engine spec for next season. So all of their focus in terms of the engine department will be on the new regulations, the reset in some respects for 2027, with Pirelli of course also moving into MotoGP as the spec tyre supplier. Of course, Yamaha and Honda are still in a position where they can develop their current 1000cc power plant, in addition to an eye on the 2027 regulations. On board with Marc Marquez, who's continuing his work on worn tyres this morning. He's up into the top 6 now. He's the world champion, 6th and 7th for the factory Ducati squad as they take some small steps in the right direction, but Bezzecchi still a comfortable 3rd of a second clear of the field.
Yeah, Jack said to Ducati boss Davide Tardozzi, Friday, a bad day at the office here in Manalica. There's not been too many of those as a duo throughout this season. How bad was it for Ducati? Well, Marc Marquez in Q1 for the first time since the German Grand Prix in 2024, and the 4th time Marc's in Q1 on board a Ducati. The first time both factory Ducatis are going to be in Q1 since the final Grand Prix at Valencia in 2023. As we saw on that graphic here on, the first time Marc has crashed in the same session since this Grand Prix here last year in Q2. Well, we just mentioned the positive news, the great news that KTM are already plotting their future in the 2027 MotoGP World Championship. They switch over to the 850cc engine capacity. We saw the KTM brand have their new motor on the dyno, so let's get all the bang-up-to-date information on how that new project is going, which I'm delighted to say KTM Technical Director Sebastian Rieser joins Jack.
Yeah, he is indeed. Exciting news for the Austrian factory, and a lot of questions surrounding it, Seb. Just firstly, talk us through the time sort of frame to get to this point, to have it on the dyno and feel comfortable that you're, I imagine, ready to rock and roll on track pretty soon.
Yes, true. I mean, as soon as the rules were clear enough, we started the design process. Then there's some time where you just have to wait for the parts that are ordered. And then is the moment to put it together. And finally we were celebrating his birthday while we were in Motegi. Of course, an important milestone for us. The next big milestone will be to put the bike on track, and that will still happen quite soon.
Quite soon? When?
We will tell you when it happens.
Now, I know you're not going to give me facts and figures with regards to the engine, but could you just compare it to what we see normally? For the fans at home, can you give an idea of what to expect in terms of the potentially similarities and differences from developing the 1000cc engine?
Well, I mean, of course, every time you learn something, and we have learned a lot in the last years, but we have done quite a gradual evolution to not destroy also the possibilities we had. Now all this learning has come into this new package. It will not be completely different, but it will be better in all the areas we were looking for.
This is a version 1, I imagine, because there's the huge question mark of the change of tyre supplier as well, and that is a huge unknown without much testing time other than that one-day testing in Misano, I believe it was. So how on earth can you develop an engine, develop a new motorcycle without having a full understanding of the tyres that you're going to put into it?
Yeah, this is very true. I mean, in the moment, the rules on the engine side were quite set. Still, it was not clear what's going to happen on the tires. Now we had one first phase, and you have to focus on what you can define in each moment of this project. That means first we were able to define the engine, and then as soon as we understood the tire better, we can steer and make the right decisions for working the tires work on our bike. And this is a process that will happen during the next year.
Of course, we had news during the year that Kurt Treve, who's been a part of KTM's engine development for so many years, was leaving for Honda. So obviously this process has taken more than just a couple of months. How much influence has he had on this first version of the 850 engine?
Well, as I explained, there's quite a time between you had to finish all the design work and order parts until they arrived. So actually he was fully involved in every step we were doing on defining this start spec. And then the rest after you do once the engine has been on the dyno and the track has been on track, and this is something we will do of course without you.
Okay, very good. I know you won't tell us exactly when, Seb. Before the end of the year, might we see it on track? Can you at least give us that?
As soon as we have tires.
He's not giving me anything. Thank you, Seb. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jack. Thanks to Sebastian Rees, the tech boss of KTM. Well, we always knew that Jack was going to try with the big questions. Well, we knew also as well that Seb was going to keep his cards very, very close to his chest. This weekend, at the moment, is turning into a Marco Bezzecchi morning, isn't it, as far as the opposition are concerned. 4 tenths out of the field yesterday, nearly 3.5 tenths clear of anybody else this morning in FP2. Pedro Acosta once again one of Bez's chief rivals for supremacy here in Manlica. As we look at Fabio the Gianantonio, some better news for our trio of Ducati GP25s. We'll see all three of them in the upcoming Q1 session, but all three of them at the moment have got themselves back into the top 10. Mark 6th, Bagnaia 7th, and the Gianantonio in 9th place. So he had zero grip yesterday, the Gianantonio. One of several riders who talked about this sort of heat-resistant, harder and stiffer carcass which Michelin bring to this searing heat in Indonesia. Fabio the Gianantonio said, the GP25 is phenomenal. You can do what you want with it when it's in that small operating window. When it's not, you are nowhere. The problem is, as he talked about yesterday, you're never quite sure what motorcycle you're going to be riding from one day to the next. The unpredictability of that GP25, you just cannot get any kind of consistency going on it at all. Let's hope they found a solution overnight for Digia, 9th quickest at the moment. And Jack's got a bit of an update on Digia.
Yeah, you might be able to see out on track that Digi right there. Perfect time to compare. He's running the GP24 Aero spec that he hasn't done for quite a few rounds now, for pretty much since Mugello, I think it was, when he officially made the switch off with Marc Marquez. He's been trying to go in that direction, while Pecco Bagnaia, the man on screen now, has stuck with the 2024 Aero in. Big search to try and find some answers. He's now reverting back to what he started the year with, potentially with some further GP24 parts on there, like Pecco has been trying and put to good use in Motegi. And he said to us yesterday, didn't he, Bertie, that right now Marc Marquez's bike is so different to what him and Pecco are using to try and find some answers. And you have to say, I'm sure there's quite a few people that are not on Marc Marquez's side of the garage that are maybe looking at what happened at Honda and the hole that they got themselves in, and how when Marc was winning with ease on a bike that only he could ride, suddenly when he moved off it, no one else could take it to any sort of level, to any kind of performances. As Ducati at the moment, allowing Marc to go down his own development path and potentially falling into the same hole that Honda did. That is going to be a big question as we go into pre-season testing, if they can't find any answers for the likes of Tissot and Bagnaia.
Yeah, good point, Jack. I've got to say my old brain's getting a bit frazzled by this constant talk of 24 aero, GP 24 parts, GP 25. Frank, I don't think anybody other than Ducati themselves have got a clue what the spec that Marc and Gian Antonio are currently running at the moment. This is a tough one. It's a bit of a conundrum, isn't it, for the engineers in terms of their future development path, with 3 GP25 riders all seemingly going down completely different avenues, Lewis.
Yeah, well, Marc Marquez can ride absolutely anything, it would seem, and get a lap time out of it. So in many respects, you don't need to worry about him. Just give him the bike and he will ride it, even allowing for what happened yesterday when he missed Q2. Clearly, Pecco Bagnaia and Fabio Gian Antonio, class riders they both are. Of course, Bagnaia, a 2-time MotoGP world champion, but clearly are much more reliant on the bike being how they want it. Bagnaia has spoken already this season of it's not as easy and it's not as natural for him to ride through problems and continue to push the absolute limit. Marc Marquez spoke yesterday when I caught it with him and said that even when you have bad days, even when the bike isn't feeling how you want it, it's in his DNA, it's in his mindset just to push through the problems. So Ducati's got a real conundrum in terms of what kind of bike do they build for 2026 and beyond. Do they build a bike that suits Bagnaia and Gian Antonio and of course Alex Marquez, who's going to be on the GP26 next season, and just take it as read that Marc Marquez will also be very, very fast on it, or do they back their new world champion and give him what he wants?
You asked Fabio Gian Antonio in his media debrief last night just how tough it is when you're on a motorcycle that's so unpredictable, so hard to call what you're going to be riding from one day to the next. And he did say, he said, "Mamma mia." That's a really, really terrible Italian impression, but it's as close as you're going to get in terms of my impression of Fabio Gian Antonio. He said, yeah, it's very, very tough, and it's getting tougher to understand just the performance he's going to get out of the GP25. He said, look, rewind to last weekend when he was really, really fast on Friday. He said he went to bed Friday night in Motegi thinking, do you know what, I've got a real good crack at fighting for the win or something big here this weekend. He said 12 hours later, I was slow, uncompetitive, and nowhere and struggling. And that's what's been really sort of hard for the Gian Antonio to fathom over the last sort of few Grand Prix. At the moment, he has got down to a 130.7, which is not a million miles away from his pace yesterday on fresh, soft rubber. Because once again, I tell you what, Marco Bezzecchi, I mean, Aprilia, if they don't at least fight or take at least one sprint or the Grand Prix victory here this weekend, this is going to be a bad weekend, because Bezzecchi at the moment is just head and shoulders above everybody else on the grid.
I was mentioned yesterday how much Jorge Martin and I will be feeling watching this, knowing that they could have been in the box seats for a big result here this weekend, given how the Aprilia is working around this Mandalika circuit. The only two, of course, inside the top 3. And Raul Fernandez has got a real shot of qualifying on the front couple of rows of the grid here this morning, as well, given the pace that he's been showing all weekend. He was 5th yesterday, 3rd at the moment. He's been speaking all weekend about needing to be more ambitious in qualifying this morning. I asked him yesterday in real terms what that means, and he said ultimately it's taking more risks in qualifying too, perhaps pushing a little bit closer to the absolute limits of himself and the bike, risking a crash to put himself on the front row.
Sorry, I was just giggling there because we just saw a shot of Uccio Salucci in the VR 4060 gallery. He was probably just looking at the screen going, I've said nothing. I've not said anything this morning. I think he's going to be keeping his trap shut for a couple of races after. It's fair to say Uccio's comments to Jack yesterday about the Morbidelli GP24 load over to Pecco Bagnaia in that Mazzano test. It did create something of a bit of a storm behind the scenes here in Mandalika. We certainly love it. Fernandez then 3rd, continuing his great weekend so far. Oliveira on the Prima Pramac Yamaha. Miguel, 30-year-old Portuguese rider, confirming in the build-up to this Indonesian Grand Prix. He's moving to BMW's factory team in World Superbikes next season. Well, his weekend goes from strength to strength. Oliveira fourth at the moment in this session. First time directing the Q2 in 2025. First time we've seen Oliveira go straight through to Q2 on the Yamaha. First time since Aragon last year. A real strong Friday for the 30-year-old.
Trio of Yamahas into Q2 with Rins into qualifying 2 for the first time since Mugello. Perhaps the Yamaha rider that we most come to expect to be quick. Quartararo was the quickest yesterday. He was the least happy of the Yamaha riders yesterday as Bezzecchi lowers the benchmark even further down to a 29.8. Quartararo described his day as a disaster yesterday. Just got one good lap in at the end to paper over the cracks. But ultimately feels that he's got no feeling at the moment on board his factory Yamaha, but is at least pleased that he can now look at a teammate's data and actually learn some stuff from Alex Rins, who was so strong yesterday. And I have to say, looking ahead to this qualifying session that's coming up in around about 10 or 15 minutes time with Q1 getting underway. Now, thanks to our statistician Thomas Mortolino for this, the last time that there were no Ducatis on the front row of a MotoGP grid was the 2020 Valencia Grand Prix. That feels that there's some genuine threat today.
Fabio Quartararo said yesterday he was really struggling with the heat-resistant, harder carcass mixing rear tyre, made riding very unpredictable. You were never quite sure what was going to be in store when you picked up the throttle. And he said just riding tight, it can never really be relaxed in that kind of situation. Pedro Acosta is at least trying to make a fight of it at the front with Marco Bezzecchi's factory Aprilia. But even though Acosta's just fired in a 1:30.033, he's still over a tenth and a half adrift of Bezzecchi, who at the moment, well, humongous odds-on favourite. He's going to be for the sprint success this afternoon. 13 laps will be the distance later on today. Blazing sunshine, no cloud to protect the riders out on circuit. Ambient temperatures well in excess of 30 degrees. Humidity to factor in as well. Bit of a breeze blowing off the nearby coastline. The flags on the main grandstand opposite our commentary box are fluttering a little bit. On these MotoGP bikes, it's just going to feel like you've been blasted by a hairdryer. 300 horsepower as Marc Marquez comes through turn 11. Yesterday he said simply Mandalika is not my circuit. You got the impression, listening to Mark speak to the media last night, that if he was offered a plane ticket back to Europe last night, he'd have been had his bags packed before you could say number 93. He said unrealistic to expect to go from 11th on Friday to fixture contention in the sprints. Modest ambitions for Mark this afternoon. He said I'll be happy with a top 5. Do we believe him? This is Marc Marquez after all.
Well, generally when he gives us his predictions and his expectations for a weekend, he's proven correct. So, kind of do trust Marc Marquez on that one, even if it doesn't necessarily sound like the Marc Marquez that has won the World Championship this year with 5 Grand Prix to spare. I also asked him yesterday, given what he's been through over the last 7 days, winning the World Championship, the biggest achievement of his Grand Prix career, even with everything he's accomplished, and of course so much pain and suffering and emotional and physical pain to get to that stage. He's then of course been to Jakarta to celebrate and to speak to the world media. He's been through all sorts of parties. Everybody wants a piece of him as the new MotoGP World Champion. Surely there must have been some sort of drop-off. Surely there must have been some sort of fatigue for Marc Marquez, having gone through all of that. And he said yes, he said I am quite tired, I am quite fatigued, but I'm not using that as any kind of excuse for the crashes and the failure to make Q2 yesterday.
It was interesting when he spoke to our colleague Elliot York here on Thursday, when Elliot asked him about how he was going to approach and tackle these last 5 Grand Prix, having wrapped up the championship so early. And he said it's a different feeling to past years when once he's clinched the World Championship, he just goes into further seek and destroy mode. He just wants to come back and hammer home his advantage, demoralise the field even further. He didn't sort of sound like he had that kind of ruthless streak in him on this occasion. You could totally understand why perhaps Mark's struggling for a little bit of focus. I'm not saying he's lacking focus or motivation, but you can understand why he's perhaps not quite as razor sharp as races before he clinched the World Championship. It is easy when the main mission is completed just to throttle off that sort of 0.5%, 1%, and that's all it takes when you're riding these MotoGP bikes. If you take your eye off the ball and you're only at 99%, you can get caught out. These bikes will bite you, as we saw Mark suffer yesterday.
At the moment, we've seen no signs of the ultra-aggressive attacking Marc Marquez. Someone went completely the wrong direction there into turn 15. It wasn't Fabio Quartararo because he was ahead of that, but someone straight on into the gravel trap in the back of the picture. Might well have been Marco Bezzecchi. He's coming through the final corner and has clearly lost a huge chunk of time because he's around 4 or 5 seconds down on his best. So it was Bez who went straight on into turn 15. His advantage then over Acosta, a 10th and a half. Fermin Aldeguer though now up into the top 3 as he was yesterday.
Yeah, we've got a bit of a pattern already emerging here this weekend in Mandalika. Your top 3 Bez, Acosta and Aldeguer. Your top 3 names from yesterday as well. Aldeguer was really pumped to get himself directly into Q2. He said so many times when he left the circuit yesterday, or went onto the circuit, the track was so difficult to read in terms of where the limit was, where the grip was. I think he was just relieved to be into a Q2 to avoid the likes of Bagnaia, Marquez and 2 other Ducatis in Q1. He did admit though, which is proving to be the case once again on this sprint Saturday morning, Bezzecchi looking uncatchable. Aldeguer though, best Friday of his rookie season. First time he's ended day 1 inside the top 3. We've got yellow flags out in the first sector. This is the third sector where Marc Marquez is approaching now. A bit further around, we've got an incident involving Miguel Oliveira. Well, that's a little bit of a halt to what has been a super strong weekend so far for Oliveira. He's walking away from the scene of the Chronicles. He was in that first sector last year when he was on the Aprilia where he had an electronics failure, no traction control, got launched to the moon with an injury, a right wrist fracture, which ruled him out for the whole of our flyaway run. Turn 2 then, Oliveira on the floor. Looked like he was relatively okay. A few scuff marks on the leathers. As Fabio Quartararo jumps up into second place. Second rider of the morning then that's in the 129s. 129.938 from Quartararo. You can see there Miguel Oliveira being ferried back to the paddock.
Well, there's one rider he can trust to pull an almighty lap out of his back pocket in qualifying. It's Quartararo, as we've seen already this season with his 4 pole positions. There is that rather second-hand Pramac Yamaha being dragged away from the scene. We are now about to see what caused it. Yes, we are. That's Oliveira, who wasn't even into the heart of turn 2. That seemed to go down straight up and down under braking.
Last year was the big high side, wasn't it? As he came out of turn 3 on the gas.
He had just done a very slow lap prior to that, Oliveira. Before he came across the line, he'd lost 6 seconds the lap before. So had Oliveira just allowed a little bit of temperature to drop out of his tyres.
Just shows you how stiff and hard that carcass is on this heat-resistant Michelin rear tyre here this weekend. Because so many riders, we said it in commentary yesterday, it seems so strange, doesn't it? So you have to be careful not to push too hard before you've got temperature in the rear tyre. When we've got track temperatures close to 60 degrees, it was a point that Bez was making yesterday. He said it's strange, to think that you have to wait 3 or 4 laps before that rear tyre really has come in. A few riders, Bastianini and Oliveira, saying it was like you were riding on ice. And it was almost dangerous, to the point on the medium rear in particular, the harder of the 2 options, the full rear here this weekend. You really did have to nurse it for those first 3 or 4 laps. It'll be interesting actually to see how the riders tackle the sprint this afternoon, when you really just have to go hell for leather for 13 laps.
Well, I asked Bez that very question yesterday about the tyre wallop, and is that going to make the first laps of the sprint and the Grand Prix particularly troublesome? And he said absolutely, it's going to be very tough. It's going to be a case of trying to get that tyre temperature, trying not to crash in the early stages. Of course, there's a race, there's a point up for grabs. I guess Bezzecchi's immediate focus though will be to try and engage in that exercise from the very front of the grid. And after topping yesterday afternoon's practice session, Bezzecchi only by 76 thousandths of a second, the 72 remains on top this morning.
P11 on Friday, P11 on Saturday morning so far for Marc Marquez. Can't be too many times since he jumped on a Ducati of any form, any guise, that he's been outside of the top 10 in successive sessions. Fabio Quartararo then gets a pre-qualifying boost, finishing that FP2 in second place. Another good session as well for Acosta. You know that he's going to be right in the heart of the battle for back-to-back front rows here in Mandalika. The 21-year-old Spaniard looking strong once again, and once again miles clear of anybody else in the KTM. Acosta 3rd, Binder 15th, Bastianini 17th, and the walking wounded, the recovering Vinales in 19th place. Quartararo splits Bez and Acosta. Surely Marco Bezzecchi is going to be getting another Tissot watch very, very soon what would be his 7th MotoGP pole position. Can anybody deny the Italian, who has just been red hot in the red hot Indonesian sunshine?
Well, as crazy as it might sound, given that we've got 4 factory Ducatis, or 4 Ducatis including the factory team in qualifying 1, feels like a very difficult Q1 to call coming up, because the general MotoGP form book has been completely ripped up and shredded so far this weekend. The form book of Mandalika so far very much suits Marco Bezzecchi, who maintains his incredible run in this Indonesian Grand Prix weekend.
Yeah, it's all gone swimmingly so far for Bears as our drone camera fires across the waves, across the beach, and this is at turn 10 in Mandalika. Bears once again the rider to beat.
Aprilia, Yamaha, KTM, your top 3 as Ducati's front row streak looks in serious threat today. Bezzecchi, Quartararo, Costa, Aldeguer once again the leading Ducati by quite some distance. Miguel Oliveira 5th despite his late fall. Ralph Fernandez in 6th ahead of Jack Miller, Alex Marquez, Luca Marini and Joan Mir, both factory holders in the top 10 again. Marc Marquez 11th as he was yesterday ahead of Frankie Morbidelli and Pecco Bagnaia, who joined him in Q1 shortly. Alex Rins in 14th, he's straight to Q2. Brad Binder 15th ahead of Fabio Di Gianantonio, Enea Bastianini and Johan Zarco. Maverick Vinales' tough weekend goes on, 19th for him, only ahead of Songkyak Chantra.
Great shot, spectacular shot once again of this wonderful, gorgeous coastline which flanks the Mandalika International Circuit. Up next, we go qualifying in MotoGP. Marco Bezzecchi already twice on pole position as an Aprilia rider in Austria and in Misano. And he is the big favourite to continue his golden run so far here in Mandalika. Marco Bezzecchi then leads the way in FP2. Up next, qualifying here in Indonesia. What a shot that is, what a sight it is. It is a pleasure to be once again in wonderful Lombok, in beautiful Indonesia for the 18th chapter in this year's MotoGP World Championship. So far, the Grand Prix of Indonesia has been the Marco Bezzecchi show. Thoroughly dominant on free practice Friday, 4/10 clear of anybody else around this 4.3-kilometre circuit, and Bears has just set himself up nicely for an attack on what would be just a 3rd Aprilia pole position for the Italian, having just led the 30-minute FP2 section. Can anybody halt Bezzecchi and Aprilia's domination of this Mandalika Grand Prix so far? Of course, Bezzecchi still firmly in the hunt for 3rd overall in the World Championship. 32 points he is adrift of fellow Italian Pecco Bagnaia in that particular chase. Well, our next 2 Grand Prix here in Mandalika and Philippine, of course, provide spectacular coastal locations. Who is going to be making the big waves coming up in our 2 qualifying sessions? Q1 for the first time in 2025 will feature both factory Ducatis, which means, of course, newly crowned world champion Marc Marquez in Q1 for the first time in almost 18 months. Very hard to pick out the 2 riders that will go into Q2 shortly. So your Q1 entry list, and there's some big names in it. World champion Marc, Morbidelli, Binder, Zarco, who had 2 falls yesterday, Bastianini, another faller on practice Friday, Jack Miller, Pecco Bagnaia making it 2 factory Ducatis into Q1 for the first time since Valencia, all the way back in 2023. The Gianantonio, Vinales and Chantra complete that lineup. So for the first time, this is a new experience. This is new territory, isn't it, as far as Marc Marquez is concerned. Q1 for the first time on the factory Ducati. Q1 for just the fourth time on board a Ducati. 3 times he was in Q1 last year on the Gresini GP23. Can Mark put behind him 2 heavy crashes yesterday, firstly at turn 10 and then at turn 5, a rather nasty high side for the factory Ducati rider to try and fight for yet another pole position. Bezzecchi though is going to be the rider to start without any question as he hones in on a 7th MotoGP pole position. Confirmation of what I just said. The Valencia Grand Prix in 2023 to close out that campaign was the last time we saw 2 factory Ducatis in Q1. Pecco Bagnaia, of course, back then was one of those riders, along with Bastianini, who also is another rider in this Q1 session. So Bagnaia, who has won a Grand Prix here previously from 13th on the grid, was back in 2023. All 3 Ducati GP25s coming up in this 15-minute opening Q1 session. There's another Ducati in it as well, with Frankie Morbidelli, 12th quickest yesterday, just 500ths he was behind Mark. The only 2 Ducatis that are already safely through to Q2 are the Gresini pairing of Aldeguer, who was 2nd yesterday, and Alex Marquez, who crept in by a whisker. Alex just 600ths clear of Mark at the end of practice yesterday.
Very unusual to say it, but there are more Ducatis in this Q1 session than any other make of motorcycle. 10 riders battling it out for 2 places in the fight for pole position that comes a little bit later on this morning. 4 Ducatis, of course, the 2 from the factory team, the 2 from VR46. Of course, those fans making it very clear who they want to see in qualifying 2. I guess if they turn that 9 upside down, then they can show support for both of the factory Ducati riders who lead the field out for qualifying 2. Joining them in this Q1 session, then we have 2 KTMs, of course, going through in this session as well. We also have a solitary Honda, or a couple of Hondas, should I say, a Zarco Chapter for the LCR squad, and just 1 Yamaha going through this session. That is Jack Miller, and he's shown pace to suggest that he could potentially disrupt the Ducatis in this Q1 session if he can keep it on 2 wheels.
6th race in a row now that Miller has found himself in our opening qualifying session. You have to say, if you look at the form book, Mark is surely going to be one of the big favourites to get himself out of this Q1 session. Fancy a little dip in the turquoise waters a little bit later on this evening when we've completed all the Saturday action here in Lombok. Just a quick reminder, if you're joining us for the first time this morning, as always, local time. This is wherever you're watching in the world, adjust your clocks, but it's 3 p.m. local time this afternoon that the Tissot sprint will be underway over 13 laps. We're on board then with Pecco Bagnaia looking back to his factory Ducati colleague Marc Marquez. Can the pair of them advance out of probably one of the toughest Q1 sessions of the season so far? So many riders, when the media spoke to them in the press centre here last night in Lombok, were sort of saying you could just see relief etched all over their face because they knew that this was a Q1 that you really did not want to be involved in when Bagnaia and Mark are in it.
Mark giving himself a little bit of distance there behind Pecco Bagnaia. Doesn't want to catch him on this Q1 lap if indeed he is faster. So the factory Ducati riders lead us down the main straight. Up behind them is Johan Zarco. Then it is Fabio Di Gianantonio. Fastest laps we've seen so far this weekend have been in the low 29s if your name is Marco Bezzecchi, mid 29s or high if you're everybody else.
Yeah, he was fast straight out the gate once again, wasn't he, Bezzecchi, at successive Fridays. He's been the quickest rider. He was untouchable on Friday in Japan last time out. Davide Tolozzi looking on then. This is a rather alien territory, isn't it, as far as the factory Ducati squad are concerned. Almost a full 2 years since they saw both red bikes featuring the Q1 session. Gigi Dall'Igna looking on, still patched up after some celebrations, and Marc Marquez's 7th World Championship went wrong here on Lombok a few days ago. Jumping into the shallow end of the pool and getting a bit of a blow on the bush did Gigi.
Marc Marquez is catching Bagnaia on this lap, as I thought he might do with the reference up ahead of him. It's not a toe that Marc Marquez is after, but he's just following the lines of Bagnaia and closing in him. Look at the bottom of your screens. He's 7 tenths up on Bagnaia at the same stage of the lap. He might almost get held up here in the final sector, up by the 63, which of course he followed home to win the World Championship a week ago. You saw a little bit of a switch there from Bagnaia. Ducati up ahead, but Marc is considerably quicker.
We're going to track then to the factory Ducatis over the line. These are going to be the first time lapse of this Q1 session. The benchmark is Marc's a 1:30.120, which is pretty more already than he's 6 tenths of a second clear. Morbidelli in second, 1:30.120 from Marc. That's less than a tenth of a second from anything he managed yesterday. So already straight on point, straight down to business is Marc, almost as quick as what he managed yesterday on that first flying lap.
Still think it's going to take 29s though to get through to Q2 in this session. Morbidelli currently in second place on a 30.6. He did a 30.1 yesterday afternoon. Still plenty of time to be found yet.
Yeah, there were 29s in FP2, so we're definitely going to get 29s in these two qualifying sessions. First one should be incoming very, very shortly. Potentially maybe from Frankie Morbidelli. Very nice wide there, isn't he, going through turn 10 as the waves crash onto the beaches in the background. Despite that mistake going into the right-hander, one of the two heavy braking zones here in Mandalika is that 10th turn. Bagnaia is still up here. The two VR46 Ducatis are going really strong on this second lap in time attack mode. Both Morbidelli and Gian Antonio looking for 1:29s.
Cost Bagnaia half second, that mistake into turn 10, and it's going to cost him a place in the top two at the moment. At the moment, the two VR46 Ducatis about to bump one of the factory Ducatis, Marc Marquez, out of the top two, because both Morbidelli and Digia on course to get themselves well into the 29s.
Yeah, this is going to be a 29 surely from Frankie. Out of the final corner he goes, right height device engaged, all close, very, very close, a 1:30.022 then from Morbidelli. The Gian Antonio does indeed break into the 1:29s. That's more like it, isn't it, as far as Digia is concerned. 6 tenths faster than what he managed yesterday, the Gian Antonio, in his first 3 laps of this session, and he's nearly 2 tenths clear of Morbidelli. So 2 Ducatis at the moment in the top 2 and going into Q2, maybe not the 2 Ducatis that we were expecting. Plenty of time, of course, for Marc and Bagnaia to correct that situation. But it's a far from happy Bagnaia at the moment. There's debriefing with his crew chief, Christian Gavarini, inside the box. Pecco, after that opening run, 7th.
You can see from the hand signals that he was giving to his team there just how his Ducati was snapping away for him. Just clearly, once again, hasn't got the confidence to really throw it on the line on that GP25 or whatever we're going to call it at the moment for Pecco Bagnaia. Marc Marquez, who is firmly on a GP25 on course at the moment to get himself back into the top 2, having been bumped out by the VR46 Giro moments ago.
Through 13, now 14, 4th gear, the right-hander. This is going to be close. It should be knocking Morbidelli out of second place. Whether he's good enough in this final sector now to depose the Gian Antonio from top spot remains to be seen. We won't have to wait too long to get an answer to that question, as now he banks it left through turn 17. Yeah, Mark, this is surely going to be a top 2 lap. It's just a question of whether it's P1 or P2. It's P1, of course it is. P1 then for the world champ, a 1:29.687. He was lightning quick in that 4th sector there, was Marc. So he fires in the 1:29.687. Which is now just about 4 tenths quicker than his benchmark time on Friday afternoon.
Hender's got himself in there in 4th on a 30.2. He's behind the trio of Ducatis that currently lead this session. Miller 5th on a 30.3. Zarco Bagnaia at 30.9. He would have gone a lot quicker than that had he not overshot turn 10 on his second lap, but clearly a lot of time to be found yet for Bagnaia. If he's to make Q2, he needs to improve by over a second from there.
Last year he needed absolutely horrendous. Indonesian Grand Prix continues. The Beast's first run, he didn't even get into a 34. Something clearly went spectacularly wrong for Anea on his opening run, down in 10th place. Just 20 riders participating in this Mandalika Grand Prix. We are missing half of our Aprilia contingent. Both Jorge Martin and Ayagura sidelined through injury. We wish the pair of them speedy recoveries. We do know confirmation yesterday that after suffering multiple fractures in his right collarbone, which has already been operated on after his first corner indiscretion at turn 1 in Matega last week, Martin definitely out of the upcoming Australian Grand Prix in Phillip Island. Binder then, well, he needs to find at least 0.4 of a second if he's to get into P2 in this session. Morbidelli also needs to pick up at least a couple of tenths if he is to knock his teammate Digia out of that top two. Well, that early run from Mark then, a 1:29.687. He stayed out longer than anybody else, didn't he, Marc Marquez?
Pecco Bagnaia has already gone back out, as you saw, for his second run. Certainly don't think Marc Marquez will be taking any liberties from there on a 29.6. He'll be going back out for a second run, surely. Of course, there'll be the big incentive to try and save a tyre for Q2, but they haven't got that level of superiority here that Marc Marquez can take that luxury.
Dan Antonio just looking for a bit of clear road ahead of him as he leaves pit lane at the moment. Job done as far as the 49 is concerned. Marc Marquez, sweat pouring off the brow as he debriefs with Gigi Dall'Igna. At the moment, this is a massive 6 minutes and a little bit more coming up for Bagnaia, who, if it stays as is, well, 17th place on the grid for the double world champion. Of course, he has had his qualifying woes already recently. 15th on the grid he was in Hungary, and that disaster in Barcelona where he was 21st. A very rare occasion that we saw the Italian qualifying outside the top 20 for a MotoGP battle. Got it all on though, hasn't he, to get himself inside that top two. 1:30.933. I mean, he needs well over a second, does Bagnaia.
I wonder whether this might be quite a smart strategy, though, to send him out early. We've heard all weekend riders speaking about the difficulty, even with the softer rear tyre, just to build up the temperature and the performance from these tyres. So Bagnaia is giving himself at least 3 or 4 laps here to try and build that temperature into his tyres, build some momentum, build some speed, and potentially get himself into that top two.
That's why Mark stayed out longer than anybody else in that first run. Marquez did the fastest time of this session on the longest stint. Everybody else put in their best times on laps 2 or 3. Mark's 1:29.687 came on lap 4. I guess Mark was always going to be perhaps waiting that extra lap, giving himself a little bit more time to get temperature in the tyres after the big crash he had high siding out at turn 5 yesterday. And so many riders did talk yesterday about how it was taking 3 or 4 laps to get the tyres to really come in and work at their best. So evidence there by the fact that Marc Marquez is quite using it to do a lap time. Your best time on 4 laps on a soft rear tyre. Normally you sort of got the best out of it by that point.
So Bagnaia will keep on pushing, 4.5 minutes to go. So assuming he doesn't back off and slow down on one of those laps, he could potentially still get another 4 laps out of this. He'll get 3 more before he comes across the checkered flag, and potentially 1 more after that. Bastianini pushing on, looking to try and rescue his weekend on the Tech 3 KTM. This unlikely to get him into the top 2, but could potentially get him in amongst Morbidelli and Binder, who are currently 3rd and 4th.
Yeah, and yesterday describing his current situation as critical. So it's unacceptable the amount of crashes he's having. Feels like he's looking at the moment though at his teammate Frankie Morbidelli, who's also putting together a pretty strong lap here. If this is a clean final sector from Morbidelli, this might actually be briefly putting himself up inside that top 2. Over the line Frankie goes, not quite. Gian Antonio though has found more pace. He's improved to 1:29.744. 500ths now behind Mark, and about a 10.5 buffer then back to Morbidelli.
So already on that second time lap of this run, Bagnaia found best part of half a second. His first lap was a 30.695 on this rear tyre. He then immediately dropped it to a 30.218. Some riders clearly are able to just fire these tyres up and get a lap out of them immediately. Bagnaia though needs a couple more, so he's just going to continue to get faster and faster here.
VR46 Ducatis once again putting up a brilliant fight, as we knew they would do, for a spot in Q2. Asking big questions, aren't they, of their 2 Ducati rivals in this opening 15-minute session. Questions which Pecco Bagnaia is going to be hoping to have the answers for. Charging into turn 10 right at the top end of the circuit. Got Brad Binder for company just behind him. Now through 11. Binder's using Bagnaia here as a brilliant reference ahead of him. This will be a bit of a shock jockey Binder could find his way through. Morbidelli and Gian Antonio now with some serious temperature in their rear tyre. Well, they are charging down towards potentially a 129.4, 129.3. It's Morbidelli just up the road ahead of the Gian Antonio. Let's follow Frankie out of turn 17. Surely this is going to be a P1 lap time. It's second over the line. The Gian Antonio goes, and that is a 129.5. So the Gian Antonio then now back in control of this session. For Mark will be breathing a big sigh of relief, because that last lap by Morbidelli was only 300 behind the 93.
Bagnaia and Binder, as you can see there, are the pointers getting identical times. Bagnaia goes straight on into turn 1. He's going to have to keep pushing on this lap, Bagnaia, to make sure he gets to the line in time for one more lap. Marc Marquez bails out of this lap, which was a personal best, until he arrived at turn 14. But Marc Marquez has only got 300ths of a second to play with here.
Just having a look at the timing screens, though. That second place not under any great threat at the moment as we move into the final minute or so of this session. That was Mark just rolling out of it, going through the third gear, turn 3. At the moment, though, he is going to be advancing into Q2. He'll still be firmly in the hunt for pole position number 75 in his MotoGP career. Gian Antonio has been some save this by Tissot. I mean, he was 18th on the leaderboard yesterday, with only Vinales and Chantra behind him. A 129.582. Crikey, there's been a magic one fix for Tissot overnight. He's pretty much a second quicker than what he managed yesterday.
So this is Marc Marquez just to start the flying lap. He already lost the front coming through the final corner, turn 17. This is not a comfortable ride through to qualifying 2 for Marc Marquez. He has just set the fastest first sector on the lap that he's just started. And Marc Marquez, it's potentially his teammate here, Bagnaia, that he might be fending off if Bagnaia gets one more lap in.
Oh, Bastianini, well, he said yesterday, every time I try and push on this KTM, I'm on the deck. Into the first corner, he's gone down.
And Bagnaia is just coming through the final corner now. Bagnaia is just starting his final flying lap, and it might already be ruined by the time he even gets to turn 1.
It will be, yeah, those yellow flags are still being waved. So Pecco Bagnaia, well, he's taken the checkered flag. That's Bagnaia.
Didn't get around in time.
So Bagnaia's taken the checkered flag. So it was immaterial, the yellow flag for Bastianini. That's a Pecco Bagnaia. Well, 7 days ago in Motegi, he was on pole position and led every lap to dominate the sprints. Fast forward a week, and his sprint Saturday has gone the opposite way here in Mandalika. Bagnaia at best will be 16th on the grid. That's going to be the third time then in the last 5 Grand Prix that Bagnaia has qualified 15th or lower. Relief then for Mark, who is going to be in the second qualifying session with Fabio De Gianantonio. Full credit to Tissot. He's found an enormous chunk of time compared to yesterday. So it's Tissot and Mark that are going to go through into Q2. Missing out, talk about fine margins, was Morbidelli in third, not even 500ths behind Mark. Miller was 4th, Binder 5th, and then you've got Bagnaia, a dismal 16th. Well, he's come from back down on the grid before the win here in Mandalika. He did it in 2023 from 13th. I don't think there's going to be too many people backing him to repeat that from even further down the grid. 16th for Pecco Bagnaia. Bastianini is 7th. Zarco's had a real struggle on this Saturday morning. 18th on the grid will be the Frenchman, having had 2 crashes yesterday afternoon. Top job though by Tissot. He's one of our 2 that goes in to Q2.
Pumped up Fabio Di Gianantonio. You heard him saying die there to his team as he came to the box. Come on. And he goes through to Q2. Morbidelli missing out by 48 thousandths of a second from making it a BR 46.12 and knocking potentially Marc Marquez out, who did improve anyway on his final run, just to give himself a little bit more margin. So Marc Marquez keeps up his record of at least making every Q2 so far this season, even if this is the first time he's had to go through qualifying 1. Jack Miller, he got himself into the 129th himself, but he's unable to make it a full complement of Yamahas in Q2.
Bagnaia was half a second quicker than what he managed on Friday, but not good enough. Other riders around him were finding a full second, like Fabio De Gianantonio. Well, it wasn't a clear run, wasn't it? It wasn't without its dramas, but at this stage, Mark won't be bothered too much because he is through into Q2. We can't stay the same though, can we? For Pecco Bagnaia, who I'm sure is a bit shell-shocked looking at the timing screen. Sector 2, he's getting destroyed. Look how much time he loses in the first half of this Mandalika lap. Absolutely nowhere in that second sector. So just as he did in Hungary and in Catalonia recently, there's going to be no Pecco Bagnaia involvement in our second qualifying session. Yeah, chatter, vibration. No front feeling as far as Marc Marquez is concerned. You want to know what a face of thunder looks like? Well, look inside that factory Ducati garage on the 63 side at the moment. Because, can you believe, we're looking at a rider, or we were just looking at a rider who was so utterly dominant last time out in Motegi. Tissot and Mark, though, into Q2.
Both doing mid-129s. It took a 29.5 and a 29.6 respectively to make Q2. Frankie Morbidelli's 129.7 wasn't enough. Jack Miller, Brad Binder and Pecco Bagnaia all on 29.9s. Wasn't enough for them either. Bastianini was already on course to miss out before his late crash. He's 7th from Johan Zarco, Somkiat Chantra and Maverick Vinales. The plan, as we heard from Nico Goyon, was to still compete in this full Indonesian Grand Prix weekend. Will that plan change after qualifying last? Fabio Di Giannantonio, though, is through to Q2, and the battle for pole position is coming your way next.
Giannantonio then with a 129.582, cruising into Q2. Can Marco Bezzecchi's Aprilia domination continue so far this weekend? Well, we will find out as the battle for pole position number 18 in 2025 unfolds shortly here in Mandalika. Welcome back to Mandalika, welcome back to Indonesia. We are about to go into what should be a dramatic Q2 session here in MotoGP. It's the Pertamina Grand Prix of Indonesia. A spectacular setting as the waves crash on the rocks. Just a short stone's throw away from this Mandalika circuit, which first joined the calendar back in 2022, and what an addition it has been. If you've got a bucket list of Grand Prix venues you plan on visiting in the future, well, highly recommend coming to Lombok, and that shot shows you just why. 4.3 kilometres, 2.67 miles in length, posing one of the most severe examinations of rider and machine on the Grand Prix calendar, and another big test coming up for 12 riders in Q2. Marco Bezzecchi, who has reigned supreme in Mandalika so far, 4/10 clear of the field yesterday, fastest this morning in FP2. A great chance you feel for Bez to seal his 7th MotoGP pole position coming up shortly. Into Q2 yesterday with Bez were Aldeguer, Acosta, Marini, Fernandez, Mir, Quartararo, Rins, Oliveira and Alex Marquez. And coming out of what was a real star-studded Q1 session, a brilliant performance by Di Giannantonio on the VR46 Ducati. A second quicker than anything he managed yesterday was Fabio to get himself into Q1 as the fastest rider from the opening session. And relief for our new world champion. It was close between Mark and Frankie Morbidelli for second place in Q1, but a 129.670 from Mark means he does advance into Q2. Of course, it was the first time all season we've seen the 93 feature in Q1, but now the full focus is on the battle to find out who will be taking our 18th pole position of the season. Marco Bezzecchi, well, he's already had pole positions for Aprilia at the Red Bull Ring in Austria. Of course, there was the dream pole position for him in front of his home crowd in Misano just a few weeks ago. There you can see 2 pole positions for Bez, 23% front row starting record. He's also had front row starts in the Saxon Ring and at Balaton Park. And make no bones about it, he is a big favourite for pole position here this morning. A 129.240 set by Bez yesterday has not really been close to getting matched. The Gian Antonio's best in Q1 just a few moments ago was a 129.582, which is the second fastest time of the weekend. But Bezzecchi is the rider that they're all playing catch-up to.
But I guess the other 11 riders in this Q2 session would have dearly hoped that Marc Marquez hadn't made the cut in Q1, but the world champion has, as you can see there on your screens, or you could see a moment ago. One of the things he's never achieved here, along with finishing a Grand Prix, is take a pole position. Remarkably, to say this about Marc Marquez, it would feel like something of an upset if Marquez can claim pole position here. Ducati's best bet of a pole position, or even a front row, might well come from this Gresini box, Alex Marquez and his teammate Fermin Aldeguer.
Alex crept into Q2 yesterday afternoon, just 600ths of a second he was ahead of Marc at the end of play in practice. Aldeguer had an excellent weekend. His best Friday of his rookie season completed yesterday. First time he's ended day 1 inside the top 3. Saw him at dinner in our hotel last night in nearby Kuta, looking very, very relaxed was Aldeguer. Certainly not looking relaxed at the moment at the back of that factory Ducati garage is Pecco Bagnaia, who after the highs of a brilliant weekend in Motegi last weekend, where it was pole position, sprint and Grand Prix win double, Bagnaia not getting out of Q1 here in Mandalika, 16th on the grid. The Italian will start this afternoon's 13-lap sprint. Here we go then, a dozen of the world's fastest riders fighting for pole position here in the Pertamina Grand Prix of Indonesia. Yesterday, Fermin Aldeguer said, Bezzecchi looks uncatchable, he looks untouchable. Well, we're about to find out, aren't we, as Aldeguer leads the field out of pit lane on the 54 BK8 Gresini Ducati. And here he is. Well, he might be the only rider representing the factory Aprilia here this weekend with Jorge Martin's sideline, but what a job he is doing in upholding Aprilia honour. He gets the fist bump from one of his crew as Marco Bezzecchi then ventures out. I mean, this is just a fantastic opportunity to take pole position. He has just been a cut above anybody else here in Mandalika so far this weekend.
Well, his teammate Jorge Martin, I'm sure, is watching in the early hours of the morning back in Europe at the moment. He, as you can see there on screens, has the all-time lap record around this Mandalika circuit at 129.088. That might come under some serious threat in this Q2 session. And I think if Jorge Martin was going to pick anybody to take that all-time lap record away from him, it would be his Aprilia teammate, Marco Bezzecchi. Bezzecchi, the runaway favourite as Q2 begins.
8 front row starts already this season for Quartararo as he builds up pace on the factory Yamaha. What about Honda? Are we going to see a factory Honda on back-to-back front rows after Juan Mir's brilliance in Q2 in Motegi 7 days ago? He was able to convert that first ever front row on board the RT213V into a podium battle in the sprint, just coming up short in 4th place. And then, of course, an excellent ride on Sunday, seeing Juan Mir take his first Grand Prix podium in what must have felt like 4 very, very long years for the number 36. This was the first group then that left pit lane. It's 3 riders who know each other very, very well. Aldeguer, followed by Alex and Marc. All he can do is sit and watch. An unwanted but frustrating spectator is Pecco Bagnaia. He would dearly have loved to have been in this second session with all that momentum, all that confidence gained in Japan last weekend. Immediately sucked out the sails of the former world champion.
Marc Marquez went safely through turn 5. It was that corner that in part explains why he was in Q1 in the first place. He crashed there in pretty dramatic fashion yesterday. He's now safely through turn 9, approaching 10 as Marco Bezzecchi begins his first Q2 time attack of the afternoon. Back with Marquez now through.
Point during this stellar season in red for the 93. He has so often, though, hasn't he, throughout his career, tended to pull a rabbit out of the hat at key moments of a weekend. It looked like he was a little bit wide there, didn't he, going through into turn 16? There was a twitch there for Mark in the background. Just has not looked confident or comfortable at all, has he, on that GP25. 129.888 from BK8 rider Fermin Aldeguer then is our benchmark lap time. Also straight away into 129s goes Pedro Acosta. You have to say, pre-Q2, anybody was going to maybe have a fight or take the fight to Bezzecchi, it was going to be Aldeguer or Acosta. Although as we say that, as you see at the bottom of your screens, Marco Bezzecchi. Over on it goes, it is a 129.3. That turn 16. He was on the front right of the grid here.
He's already pitted at the end of his first run, which puts him fifth. He's still in the 130s, only the top four in the 29s, and that's a crash for Fabio Quartararo.
9-7, but obviously he would have come through the yellow flags for this late crash at 15 for Quartararo. Whoa, no warning whatsoever there for Fabio. He was down before he'd even realised what was going on there. Oh, that went so quickly. Big slam on the right shoulder there for Quartararo.
He's down in 12th place at the moment. Those yellow flags are still waving, so this pair of laps from the Grassini Ducatis look like they're going to be scrubbed off, and Aldeguer comes straight up pit lane anyway. That might have put him back end of Marini on the front row. We'll of course wait to see if Marini's lap time is indeed allowed to stand, because he certainly looked like he came through the yellow flags too. All immaterial as far as Marco Bezzecchi is concerned, as he's a tenth of a second clear of Acosta.
Yeah, no problems at the moment for Bezzecchi. He is just in cruise control, isn't he? Raul Fernandez, who was fifth fastest yesterday, he was in that top six once again this morning. The Aprilias are just working beautifully, aren't they, around this 4.3 kilometre Mandalika circuit. Estimated P3 this from Fernandez. Just two previous front row starts in his MotoGP career for the number 25. Well, he's got it wrong, unfortunately. It all went wrong in the final sector. Was he pitting? I think he might have been pitting, or is he pitting because it went wrong? At the moment, Marc Marquez, well, so far in our opening 17 Grand Prix of the season, Marc has not started off the second row of the grid. He hasn't qualified lower than fourth, as the inquest starts inside the factory Yamaha garage after this rapid get-off for Quartararo.
He'll be as confused as all of us to explain what happened there. Just look at the speed he's carrying. He's up into fourth gear, now he shifts up into fifth, and it's around about the 150 kilometres now moment as he shifts down to second, but the Yamaha tops, he's already, as you can see, top left of your screens, out on his second bike.
Really then is in third place that we are at the moment, looking at back-to-back front row starts for the factory Honda team. Honda are resurgent, aren't they? Honda are coming back to the fore here in MotoGP. Luca Marini, this would be his 10th. All heading back out onto circuit. Oliveira's confidence. We've taken a little bit of a knock after a crash at turn 2 in FP2 this morning. He's down in 11th place at the moment with just Quattararo behind him. This will be, of course, his first front row start of 2025, if he was indeed.
On the grid at the moment is Alex Marquez.
What we do know after Jack's great spot as Rins goes in hot into turn.
Set the fastest first sector on run 2, so we've got one Aprilia on pole position at the moment. It's another Aprilia launching the biggest threat to better.
Just sort of fastest second sector as well as the Spanish rider. Cream the field in that sector 2. That's where he is so good. Marine looking to keep himself on the front row for the first time on the factory Honda. What about Raul Fernandez? This will be close. Surely this is going to push Raul onto the front row of the grid. Will be just his third ever front row in MotoGP. Over the line he goes, it is. Third quickest then goes Fernandez with a 129.543. This though could be his beckoning for Bezzecchi. Are we going to witness the first ever 128 lap of the Mandalika circuit? He's up by over 4 tenths. But then he's 7 tenths of a second back. Aldeguer looking to get himself back onto the front row. This would be some job by Aldeguer on the spare Gresini Ducati. Over he goes into second with a 129.230. A showstopper though by Bez.
No one's beating that. Alex Marquez certainly isn't beating that. Has he gone down at the same corner he crashed at yesterday into turn 13? Alex Marquez.
Marc Marquez, in all of this drama, has dropped now down to last place. In this Q2 session, just looking at Marc's split times, yeah, he backed out of his last lap, did Marc. 12th place on the grid, front washes out for Alex. So the best he's going to be hoping for is 7th place. Marini, 5th after his front row charge early on. What about Acosta? Can he pinch back a... Lost the front once again, going through 13.
And he's miles off. He's only going to get on to the third row best here is Marc Marquez. He's going to have one more lap after this. But this is a Marc Marquez no way near the level we've seen in 2025 so far. Many reasons for that, not all down to Marc Marquez himself. He's going to be somewhere near to Gian Antonio and Oliveira in 29.8, 9th and 10th. Here comes the 90 over the line. He doesn't even improve on 12th.
He's at the wrong end of this Q2 session, although having just said that, Raul Fernandez does indeed move himself back on the front row. Marc is at a real strong first sector. His personal best first sector is on the money. Can he salvage some? Quartararo. So Alex Rins fighting to get himself back on the front row. And almost unbeatable. Well, he has delivered. Oh, how on earth do you stop Marco Bezzecchi on the factory of Prix here in Mandalika?
You don't.
A 1:28.832, a historic lap time, the first and only 1:28 we've ever seen here at the Mandalika International Circuit. That was not even close. 0.02 of a second shy, being 0.4 clear of Aldeguer in second place. Aldeguer once again is Bez's closest rival. Yesterday he was second, with over 0.4 behind Bezzecchi. Respect to Aldeguer, his first MotoGP front row, and he did that 1:29.2 on his spare Ducati GP24 after tech issues befell his number one bike. Raul Fernandez is on the front row of the grid for just the third time in MotoGP. Outstanding job. Only two Aprilias on track here this weekend are on the front row of the grid. Bezzecchi, Aldeguer and Raul Fernandez. Let's go down to Jack for some immediate reaction.
Yeah, here with Francesco Venturato, crew chief for Marco Bezzecchi. I have to say, you guys look unbeatable going into the sprints and the Grand Prix. Is that a dangerous place to be almost?
Yeah, it's unbelievable because you see, step by step we grow every race, so he's making an unbelievable job. Every guys in the team from the factory, everybody's pushing so hard to achieve this result. We are in a very good moment, so we enjoy enjoy. We start to enjoy a lot. So it's the best way to go to work, no? Enjoy every races, and so we are so happy.
Where's the speed come from here?
Sorry?
Where's the speed come from here?
From a lot of things. That every detail we are looking at everything. So I don't know.
Great job, well done.
Maybe a big gap I put the rider for sure.
Absolutely, you've got a good one on board, well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jack. Yeah, a combination of some very talented engineers and a very talented MotoGP rider in the shape of Marco Bezzecchi. What a job that was. That was a pleasure to watch Bez in full flow find that record-breaking all-time lap record, a 1:28.832. Estimated Jorge Martin's previous benchmark. Fermin Aldeguer second, Ralph Fernandez third, Alex Rins fourth. Acosta and Marini will join Rins on that second row of the grid. Best of the Marquez brothers was Alex in seventh. Quartararo will split Alex and Mark on the third row of the grid. Well, what a weekend it's been so far for Aprilia. Pole position and third on the grid, thanks to a brilliant performance by Trackhouse rider Ralph Fernandez. Let's get the thoughts of the boss, Davide Brivio, who is with Jack.
Yeah, I'm sure that Davide felt like he was on the bike with Raul there, Bertie. What a job. Front row of the grid. We've been here before, of course. The big moment comes in the sprint later on today, but you guys look to be in a great position to compete.
Yes, of course, to start in the first row, you know, it changes everything, and of course you have a good chance. But I'm happy because Raul, I mean, we worked very well since the beginning of the weekend, always been fast, and he did say yesterday, we can try for the first row. And so then he did it, great job, and now let's go to the race.
Congrats, well done.
Thank you.
Awesome job all round by the depleted Aprilia effort here this weekend. First and third on the grid. The late drama that came the way of Alex Rins wasn't his first front row start since Austin 2023, but still his best qualifying since that Grand Prix, of course, where he was ultimately victorious for LCR Honda. So Rins then will be the lead Yamaha on the grid. Fabio Quartararo 8th. Miguel Oliveira was 10th.
Yeah, well, he might smile, Alex Rins. Boy, has he had some issues physically over the last couple of years, but that is the first time he has out-qualified Fabio Quartararo in 2025. Well, Ralph Fernandez said coming into this weekend, we need to be more ambitious in qualifying. I need to take more risks. He has been good to his word.
He really has, yeah. Vamos. P3, there's his younger brother Adrian coming to join these Parc Ferme accelerations. Some top rides in that session, none more so than the brilliant Bezzecchi. 1:28.832. Bailey looks like he's broken sweat. We know he has. Mentally and physically draining conditions as Fabiano Sterlachini, the new Aprilia tech guru for this year, stepping into rather big shoes to fill after Romano Alvesiano went over to HRC. Sterlachini, a big embrace for Ralph Fernandez. Splitting the two Aprilias is Fermin Aldeguer, his first front row start in the MotoGP World Championship. And what a job though by Trackhouse Aprilia rider Ralph Fernandez on the front row here in Mandalika, and he's with Jack.
Raul, congratulations, onto the front row of the grid. Davide just said you felt there was front row potential today, but how tough was it to go out there and put it together?
Yeah, it's true, and at the end we get to put all together. Yeah, I think today the maximum was try to think on the second place, because Marco, I think he's making a step in front of all of us. But anyway, the pace is positive, so the important thing for today was trying to put a bike on first round, because it changed a lot the race. So I am happy for the team. I am very happy for Gould, because I think it's the first time that they are in a Parc Ferme, so hopefully later and tomorrow can fight for be here again. And yeah, of course, thanks to the team, thanks to my family, but also thanks to Davide, because always he's gives me something that day by day I feel that I am better rider. So thanks to him, thanks to all the team, and yeah, happy, but it is not the end, it's at the beginning.
Good luck this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah, top job by Ralph Fernandez, the 24-year-old Spaniard who has had some difficult times in his MotoGP career. Twice previously has he had top 6 finishes in sprints. Well, he's got a great opportunity to make it 3 this afternoon. 13 laps will be underway at 3 p.m. local time, and it will be Raul Fernandez on the front row of the grid. Well, I'm sure Aprilia can't quite believe what they're witnessing here. 2 Aprilias on the grid, both of them on the front row. There's Davide Brivio on the right-hand side of the picture, just talking to the big boss, Massimo Rivola. He must have thought, well, what lies in store this weekend without Ayagura and without Jorge Martin on RSGPs. Well, those left standing for the Nawali factory have really stood up and been counted here so far this weekend in Indonesia. The first and only 128 lap delivered by Marco Bezzecchi, an absolutely brilliant performance by him. And for the very first time, certainly not the last, on the front row in MotoGP, it's Gresini Racing rider Fermin Aldeguer with Jack.
For me, for so long you've been telling us if I can get it right on a Friday afternoon and a Saturday morning, then I give myself a great chance of fighting for big things. Well, you've got the job done this weekend. What's changed here in Indonesia?
Nothing. The bike is the same. I'm the same, but for sure we put different goals for this last race. Try to improve the Fridays. Try to improve the qualifying. And yeah, here we do a big step. Nothing. Super happy because we are working in ourselves without look at the other riders. We are super focused and we are enjoying. Also, with all the problems during the qualifying, the front tire, I did I think 18 laps in the front tire because this was my spare, but it's okay. I think starting the second position is a good opportunity for look our potential and try to enjoy.
Good luck this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a brilliant job by Fermin Aldeguer. 129.230 secures him second place on the grid, and that means, of course, he's the top Ducati on the grid as well. Next best Ducati behind Aldeguer, well, that was his teammate Alex in 7th place. Mark goes from 9th at 129.773. Both the Gian Antonio and Mark, who came through Q1, were a little bit slower actually in that second qualifying session than what they managed in the earlier exchanges. Well, as mentioned, the words we're using to describe Marco Bezzecchi this weekend: unbeatable, uncatchable, and now a history maker here in Mandalika. Pole position for the Aprilia star, and he's with Jack.
Marco, a historic fastest ever lap of this Mandalika circuit. So far this weekend, you look unbeatable. Where has this speed come from? And is that feeling of invincibility something to be frightened of going into today? How important is it to keep the focus?
Well, it's mandatory. You know, it's true that I'm quite quick, but the pace seen from the FP2 result was pretty close between me and many others many other riders that are super quick. And as you know, in MotoGP you can never relax. So I'm happy for the qualifying for sure, because it's also the grid for tomorrow, not only today, and this is important. But now we still have to do the main part of the weekend, that are the races. So yeah, let's keep ourselves focused and let's try to make our best.
Brilliant lap, well done.
Thank you very much.
It was a brilliant lap. It was a phenomenal lap. It was a lap which, as expected, confirms Bezzecchi's status as the big sprint and Grand Prix favourites. Aprilia have only ever had one podium here in our previous visits to Mandalika. Maverick Vinales is second here in 2023. Will Bez be able to go one better tomorrow? Well, he's going to take some stopping, isn't he? There's Paolo Bonora, such a key cog behind the scenes for the factory Aprilia team. Third pole of the season for the Nawali factory for Bezzecchi. He did it in Austria. He did it in front of his home crowd in Misano. Well, that was a sensational lap. First time Aprilia have had 2 bikes on the front row of the grid since the Sachsenring last year. That would, of course, been, I guess, Miguel Oliveira, wouldn't it?
Double for Trackhouse,
Fernandez, yeah, double for Trackhouse. Another great day for Trackhouse in that beautiful Gulf livery. As Ralph Fernandez mentioned, at the moment though, there's a gulfing clash between Marco Bezzecchi and the rest of the field in MotoGP. A very, very tough weekend to say the least for the Ducati Lenovo team. As look at that, the front tyre tucks once again underneath world champion Marc Marquez. Ducati Lenovo 9th on the grid with Marc, 16th on the grid with Pecco Bagnaia. More misery coming the way of the Italian, but nothing but joy and jubilation as far as Aprilia are concerned, as they have both Raul Fernandez and Marco Bezzecchi on the front row of the grid. Just over 3 hours then we are away from lights out for the sprint this afternoon, where Bezzecchi will be looking for just his 3rd ever sprint victory. And he's going to do it from pole position.
A 1:28.832, the fastest ever lap of Mandalika for Marco Bezzecchi. Pole number 3 of the season for him. Fermin Aldeguer second from Raul Fernandez, back on the front row for the first time in over a year. Alex Rins, best qualifying in 2.5 years in 4th. He's top Yamaha from Pedro Acosta, who will launch a podium challenge from 5th. Marini 6th on the first of the Hondas from Alex Marquez, Fabio Quartararo and Marc Marquez, the heavyweight 3rd row. Oliveira, De Gianantonio and Mir on row 4. Morbidelli missed out in Q1, he's 13th ahead of Miller and Binder. Bagnaia down in 16th place, out in Q1 for the 3rd time in the last 5 Grand Prix. Enea Bastianini 17th on the first of the Tech 3 KTMs, he crashed in Q1. The LCR Hondas will start next to each other, Zarco and Chancha. Maverick Vinales completing your grid of 20. Marc Marquez close to clinching the BMW M Award now, even if it was his smallest points haul of the season. Alex Marquez is 69 points back. Fabio Quartararo, who of course crashed in Q2 this afternoon, is still in a comfortable 3rd.
So, world champion Marc Marquez with plenty of work to do from the 3rd row of the grid. Baking hot conditions here in Mandalika, and Marco Bezzecchi's pace simply too hot to handle for the chasing pack. A record-breaking Q2 session from the Italians. On pole position here for the Grand Prix of Indonesia. Pecco Bagnaia, and it's his first sprint victory of 2025. What a sprint Saturday has been for the Italian. The crowning glory here in Motegi is the comeback